Today we'll be taking a closer look at China and the key role it could play in mediating between Russia and the rest of the world as the Ukraine crisis intensifies further still. Joining me now is Nigel Inkster, Senior China Advisor at the International Institute for Strategic Studies and the former Assistant Chief of the British Secret Intelligence Service. Thank you for joining us this morning, Nigel.
Not at all.
I think it was now actually afternoon, so time flies on this show. Now to begin, I wondered if you could explain to listeners how important China is when it comes to diplomatic power on Russia.
Well, in principle, China has a lot of influence over Russia. We saw on the 4th of February when Vladimir Putin had a summit with Xi Jinping in China prior to the Winter Olympics that the two sides talked about a strategic relationship that had no limits. And it is a relationship that essentially is driven by a mutual antipathy to United States hegemony, but also by a degree of mutuality of economic interest. China is energy hungry. Russia needs to export as much energy as possible. Russia sees attractions in Chinese consumer goods, and so they've got a lot in common. Having said that, of course, the key question everybody is asking themselves now is what did Xi Jinping know and when did he know it in relation to Ukraine? The short answer is we can't say for certain. The United States government have put out information to the effect that Putin told Xi on the 4th of February that he would undertake some action in Ukraine. And of course, US and British intelligence had been passing up-to-date intelligence to the Chinese for some while, indicating what was afoot. But if this did happen, I think what Putin probably said was that there was going to be a coup de main in which the current Ukrainian government would be arrested, replaced with a quisling administration under Russian control, probably with Yanukovych in charge of it. It would all be over in 48 hours, no problems, nothing to worry about. And the Chinese bought into that narrative. They're now pretty taken aback, firstly by what Russia has actually done, and secondly by the purpose and unity of the Western response. And it's quite clear that Chinese diplomats and intelligence officers around the world are scrambling to find out what's going on, but also concerned about how they can deliver to their masters a very tough message that this changes everything and business as usual is no longer an option. And that's what they're now wrestling with.
And when we look at the response from the Chinese government so far and also Chinese banks and so forth, has that been more hostile, do you think, than Putin may have expected?
Well, I think there are different responses. The Chinese business community and the Chinese financial community are horrified by the prospect of getting caught up in secondary sanctions and by the overall impact, economic impact that this Ukrainian conflict will have. China's already suffering from stagflation, and what is happening now can only add to that. But of course, at the top, I don't see any indication that China is about to dissociate itself from Russia. The Chinese official line has been to refuse to acknowledge that what has happened is a military invasion, and they've been producing the usual mealy-mouthed utterances about the need for all sides to respect each other and to find a peaceful solution, which at the moment they're doing absolutely nothing useful to promote. And I think for the party state, for the party state leadership, I think they're going to look at this, with a very cold and cynical approach, concerned primarily to minimize the damage to China, and then B, to see what advantage they can draw from the situation.
And on that, I wondered, Dominic Raab this morning actually speaking of his frustrations to Times Radio when it comes to the little sway the UK has have in bringing China into a role as a broker. Do you think that we could see China as a credible broker, in this situation? And would they, would the Chinese government be a voice that Putin would actually listen to, unlike most voices?
I think the answer to that is no. I don't think Putin is, of a mind now to listen to anybody. The simple fact is that having gone this far, he really has no alternative but to keep on going until he is able, however implausibly, to claim that he has achieved his objective. And I do not see China being willing to stick their necks out to either pressurize or persuade him.
Do you think recent events will have impacted thinking in the Chinese government when it comes to Taiwan? There have been parallels drawn between an invasion of Ukraine, a Chinese invasion of Taiwan in the past. I wonder if you think this would have meant more or less enthusiasm?
Well, I don't think it's incentivized China to move towards an early military resolution of the Taiwan situation. They have their own timetable, they have their own calculations, and I don't think they're going to allow what is happening in Ukraine to alter those. They will, however, be looking very hard at the response of the international community, particularly the Western community, in relation to the sanctions that have been brought and other actions taken. They will also, I think, be reflecting on how much more difficult it's turning out to be for Russia's armed forces to achieve their objectives than was anticipated. That said, an invasion of Taiwan is a very different proposition from a land invasion of Ukraine, and all the more difficult. A contested amphibious assault is recognized to be the most difficult military operation that can be conducted. The Americans thought about doing this during the war in the Pacific to get rid of the Japanese, but concluded that they would need more resources than were required for the Normandy landings. So they moved in another direction.
Now, you mentioned the response of the West and how Putin is finding plenty of difficulties in his desired intentions. We have seen a united West in recent days. I think that has taken Putin and others by surprise, how Germany and others have moved. Do you think that that is bad news for China when it comes to its geopolitical aims more widely?
Yes, it is. They hadn't expected this. They've been unpleasantly surprised. There is supposedly going to be a summit between the European Union and China on the 1st of April, because, of course, bureaucrats don't have any sense of humor. I think many of us have been warning Chinese counterparts that if this event does happen, they will find themselves dealing with a very different European Union from what they thought they had. And things are going to be very different. A lot of things are going to be very different. This will impact on China's Belt and Road ambitions in relation to Europe. Major transit countries like Poland will be, which traditionally has had quite a good relationship with China, will be looking at this again in the light of perceptions that China not only failed, but may actually have been complicit in Putin's objectives, failed to prevent Putin, or always complicit in his objectives. And Germany has gone through 180 degrees. They've effectively said that the policies that they've been cherishing for the last 70 years are no longer fit for purpose, and they need new ones. And all of a sudden, China is going to find itself dealing with a different Germany. The European Union already was starting to take a tougher, a more hard-headed approach to China. And financially, this matters. I mean, I think Chinese exports to Russia are of the order of sort of $85 billion a year. Chinese exports to the European Union are close to $1 trillion a year.